Well, good morning, Hope City family. Like Adam said, my name is Gabe, and I am the Family Life pastor here, and I do have a crazy story to tell you guys. So like Adam said, I was supposed to be here last Sunday. I really was. I wasn't trying to play hooky. I wasn't trying to get a Sunday off. I was supposed to be here. But I was at the mercy of a large airline company, and if you've ever been at the mercy of an airline company, you know exactly why I wasn't here. I was at the beach with my friends last week, and it was an awesome time where we got to just hang out and rest and just relax, and it was a ton of fun, and I had a blast, and I was so refreshed and ready to just get back into the groove of things. So I was supposed to fly out Saturday night at around 6 from Panama City. I was going to fly to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta to Arkansas. Great plan. Thought we were good. Left our Airbnb at around 4:30, said goodbye to everybody. Was really sad because I knew it was going to be a while before I saw them again, but it was still like so fun. And I just wanted to be in the Uber and just be quiet and sad and mentally prepare for the flight. My Uber driver had other plans. She proceeded to talk to me about everything. She talked to me about traffic. She talked to me about the different flights that come in and out of Panama City. She talked to me about the music she was listening to. And the whole time I'm in the back, I said, I just want to be quiet. So by the time we got to the airport, I was ready to go home. So I get through security really quickly. It's a small airport. And I'm sitting down at the gate. And when I'm sitting down, I'm like 15 minutes before we board. I'm like, perfect timing. I don't have to be here that long. I don't have to worry about it. I can just jump on this plane. While I sit down, I see 20-minute delay gets added to the flight. Like, all right, it's okay. I have an hour and a half layover in Atlanta. We'll be fine. We will be fine. A couple minutes later, another 20-minute delay gets added. And I'm like, a little closer, but we're fine. I still got like 50 minutes. That's plenty of time. I'm on the phone with Madison, my wife, and I'm telling her what's happening. As I'm on the phone with it, an hour-long delay gets added on top of the 40 minutes. So now I have no chance of catching my flight. I have no chance. So I go calmly up to the Delta desk, and I'm talking with them, and I'm on the phone with Madison, and we figure out that the only flight I can get is at 7:45 the next morning, and then I won't get back into Arkansas until 1 o'clock. Oh, and by the way, that Sunday was Madison and I's 2-year anniversary. I'm rocking it. I'm doing awesome. So then I'm making phone calls. I call Adam. I let him know what's happening. I call my awesome volunteer team with people like Barry and Grace and Taryn, and they stepped up, and they were awesome, and they went above and beyond just to cover for me, and I was super grateful for them. But then I called my friends, and I'm like, hey, where are you guys at? We're at a restaurant. I'm like, sweet. I'm going to Uber there, and I'm going to have to stay the night with you guys. I'll tell you about it when I get there. So I get in the Uber, I'm making texts, I'm calling people, I'm making sure everybody knows what's going on, and then all of a sudden, we pull up, and I'm so in my head that I leave my only pair of headphones in the car. So now I have to sit the next day in the Atlanta airport for 4 hours without headphones, without anything. So I get a text later that night, oh, your Uber has found your headphones. I'm like, awesome, can we drop this off somewhere? Can we find somewhere to meet up? Doesn't answer me back. I'll never see him again. Those are gone. So then I'm sitting at dinner and I'm hanging out with my friends. They're trying to make me laugh. They're trying to cheer me up about everything going on. And while we're sitting down, I kid you not, I get an alert from Delta that says, hey, Gabe, there's no room on the 7:45 a.m. flight. You're flying out at 6 in the morning. Awesome. We board at 5:20 in the morning. Great. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So we go back and we're cleaning up the Airbnb. We're trying to get some sleep. I wake up at 4 in the morning. I go to the airport. I make it home. Even with all of that, even with all that stuff, that crap, even with missing my flight and having to fly out at 6 a.m. and I'm never going to see those headphones again. And it was just one after another, thing after thing just going wrong. The only thing that made it all right was that I was with my friends. I was with my friends. They cheered me up. They made me laugh. They let me vent about what was going on in my life. They were my good friends. Now, when I start talking about friends, I'm sure some of us in the room have this like list in their heads, right? Maybe friends from when you were younger, or maybe friends you have now. Friends they're the people that have been with us through our best times and worst times, right? Throughout our life. But today, it may be a different story. Today, you may be sitting there thinking, do I really have any friends? Do I have anyone that I can go to? And if you're thinking like this, if you think you're alone, you're not. This research group named Barna, they did a recent study that shows that most Americans would say that they have 1 to 5 close friends. But of those same people that they surveyed, 20% of those people admit that they regularly feel lonely or like they don't have any friends at least once or twice throughout their week. That's a big number. And of that number, of that 20%, they found that the highest number of people that answered yes to this question were those that were young single adults or people that were working remotely, unemployed, or just by themselves constantly, right? See, we see all these things and we think, well, I don't need friends. But you couldn't be further from the truth. You see, another research company found that friendships are a key indicator of happiness, that people with more personal connections are more likely to live longer, less likely to get sick, have improved mental health over those that don't, and it can experience a secure amount of emotional and social freedom, that they actually have safety in those friendships. Friendships are important. And I know we've just come out of a time in the world where it can be very easy to feel alone or isolated. But guys, just like anything else, friendships are worth the investment. They are. So I'm going to ask this question a couple times this morning. Do you need a friend? Do you need a friend? You see, we're going to be diving into Scripture today, and what it becomes abundantly clear is that God gives friendships so that we may walk through life together. I'll say it again. God gives friendships so that we may walk through life together. Now, the past few weeks, we've been talking about relationships, and more specifically, our family, right? We talked about how messy it can be and hard they can be. And ultimately, though, we talked about how important they are, how life-giving they are when we embrace them fully, right? And this morning, we're going to be looking at how friendships are in that same sort of vein, that when we embrace friendships, we can experience life that we didn't think was possible, right? More specifically, we're going to be in the book of Exodus today. Now, I know what you're thinking. Book of Exodus, friends, huh? Stick with me. Last summer, we were going through the story of Moses, if you were here with us, and we got to walk through the book of Exodus. And the Exodus is this amazing story of how God chose to free his people, the Israelites, from slavery in Egypt and guide them into the promised land. Now, the story didn't always go as we would expect, and there were thing after thing that happened along the way, but ultimately we got to see that God was with the Israelites. More importantly, or more specifically, God was with Moses, the man he chose to lead his people. See, Moses had many ups and downs in his life. He went from being hidden in a basket at birth to leading the Israelites across a parted Red Sea. He went from killing a guy to delivering the 10 Commandments from God himself. You see, in each step along the way, what's super clear and cool to see is that God surrounded him with people who loved and supported him, with friends. And this morning, we're going to look at 3 distinct types of friendship that Moses has that we can see throughout his life. 3 distinct friendships. See, those friendships are still important for us to understand today. See, the friendships are with those that have gone before you, those beside you, and those behind you. First, we're going to look at those before you. If you have your Bibles, if you'll turn to Exodus chapter 2, starting in verse 11, that's where we're going to start this morning off. And we find Moses in a very tough situation in his life, to put it mildly. It reads, one day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked to their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, why do you strike your companion? He answered, who made you prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, surely this thing is known. When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Here we see Moses running away from the most powerful man in the entire world at the time, running because of something he did. This is Moses at his lowest possible point. He just killed a guy. But watch what God does. And it's just so awesome as we see what God does when Moses takes the seat by a well. Let's continue. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. When they came home, their father Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come home so soon today?" They said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and even drew water for us and watered the flock." He said to his daughters, "Then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him that he may eat bread." And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. So Moses goes to a well and ends up getting married. Nice. Good job, Moses. But look back at what verse 21 has to say. Pay a little bit more attention to it. It says, Moses was content to dwell with the man. See, in this moment, Reuel stepped in and loved Moses. God provided for someone to support Moses in it. And it is because of that investment that Reuel made into Moses that ultimately Moses was able to go out and do what God had in store for him. That without this investment that Reuel made, without Reuel loving and pouring into Moses, it would be that much harder. See, the investment into Moses' life is worth it. And Moses was a better person because of what Reuel did for him here. Moses saw those before him. Second, look to those beside you. Now, when Moses was first told by God what he was going to do for the kingdom of Israel, he wasn't sure he could. See, we read in Exodus 6, verse 29, the Lord said to Moses, "I am the Lord. Tell the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I say to you." But Moses said to the Lord, "Behold, I am of uncircumcised lips. How will Pharaoh listen to me?" Many scholars believe that Moses had some sort of speech impediment or anxiety disorder for public speaking, and that he was not able to do. He wasn't sure he could do it alone by himself. So God allowed for someone to come alongside him and support him in this. If you keep reading in chapter 7, "And the Lord said to Moses, 'See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother shall tell Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go out of his land.'" Yet Aaron wasn't the only one that was beside Moses. No, you see, back after they come out of slavery, out of the Israelites make it out of slavery, they have many, many hardships. And if you have your Bibles, if you turn to Exodus 17, you'll come across a very important moment for the nation of Israel. They find themselves in battle with another nation, fighting. And they figure out, God lets Moses know that as long as he keeps his staff in the air, the Israelites will win the battle. But if it drops, they will begin to lose. So we see in verse 12, an awesome example of what sticking by with your friends and enduring things together looks like. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. You see, life is made easier when we have someone beside us in the middle of the ups and downs, someone that will hold our arms up even when they're just as tired as we are, walking together as opposed to alone. Moses saw those beside him. And finally, Moses looked to those behind him. See, God once again makes something abundantly clear to Moses. Investing in the generation behind you is very important. It is important to me, right? Especially for the future of Israel. We read in Deuteronomy 3:28, "But charge Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for he shall go over at the head of these people, and he shall put them in possession of the land you shall see." So basically, we see God telling Moses here, hey, you will never see the promised land, but you can have a hand in investing in the one that will lead the Israelites into it one day. That you will come alongside and support someone behind you so that they may do things for me. And if you look a bit forward to Deuteronomy 34, we've come to the end of Moses' life. And we find Moses, and Moses has faithfully served God. And he has served the people of Israel with honor and respect. See, after his death, something important happens in verse 9. And Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. So the people of Israel obeyed him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. Because of the time that Moses gave to Joshua, the people went forward and trusted in Joshua and in God, because Moses allowed for those behind him to be better equipped for what was to come. Moses saw those behind him. Some of you may be sitting there today thinking, so what now? Like, I know, Gabe, friends are important. Friendships are important, but what does this have to do with me right now? Well, I'm going to ask you something I asked earlier. Do you need a friend? It's a simple question, but one that many of us in the room wouldn't love to say is a little harder for us to know, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. Making friends can be really hard. The time that has to be put into it, the vulnerability it takes, the chance of being hurt all over again, and the fear of putting yourself out there can sometimes just be so overwhelming. It can. See, it can feel like you're not supposed to have friends, that you don't get that luxury. I'll be honest, when Madison and I, my wife, we moved down here almost 2 years ago now. And when we first got down here, I found it really hard to make friends. See, I kept focusing on the friends I had had in other places instead of going out and connecting with my new community. And I found myself just kind of being lonely. And it felt like I was a stranger in someone else's home when I was around people I didn't know, right? And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's felt like this. But God did some amazing things. He provided the right people to come into my life, to love me, to break down walls, to allow me to connect to people, so that now I can look out and I can say, you know what? I do have friends that have gone before me. People like Marcia and Kevin and Barry and Scott. I have friends that are beside me. People like Drew and Nathan and Robbie and Madison. I have people that are behind me. I have friends behind me. I have my friends like Colton, Noah, Amelia, Nate. But it didn't come easy. And I'm not saying I have enough friends, because if you want a friend, I'm open. I like friends. But no, it takes work. It does. Just like we saw in Moses today, each of these types of friendships, it takes work. We're going to be looking at what each of these kinds of friendships requires out of you. First, we're going to be looking at friendships with those before you first requires contentment. Now, the first thing, like we saw out of Moses today, you see, Moses was just content to be with Reuel. And I have a feeling it was less about the awesome house that Reuel probably had or the daughters, and maybe more about the awesome man that Reuel would have been, how loving and supporting he was, right? And the time that Moses got to be with him. For me, I had to learn this idea of contentment a little later than I care to admit. See, growing up, my best friend in the whole wide world was my grandpa. We did everything together. We would cut the grass, like whether we were going to the lake or cutting grass, like I was always with him. But then something happened, something that I'm sure everybody in here can relate to. I became one of the worst people ever, a middle schooler. I'm just kidding. I love middle schoolers. They're awesome. They're the best, and I love them. But just jokes. But seriously, I became kind of the worst. And I was more worried about going to the football game without my grandpa because he'd be lame to be with, or going and doing things with friends on Saturday mornings instead of just spending time with him. I hated going to the lake. And but something changed. When he got really sick, I started to realize I didn't care about what we did anymore or going out and doing things with anyone else. I just wanted to have as much time with him as I could. See, the things I learned from him in those years are things that I still carry with me today. They made me a better man and a better follower of God because of the impact that he had on me. See, when you are content with those before you, you begin to learn and understand things you never knew faster. Faster. So let go of that desire to always be going and just be content with who you're with. Relationship with those before you requires contentment. The second thing it requires is growth. Now, if you look back at the Bible, there is story after story of when someone is being poured into, that person becoming a better person, a better leader, a better follower of God. Stories like Ruth and Naomi, David and Samuel, Paul and Barnabas, Moses and Reuel. It goes on and on. You see, in order to fully get the most out of these relationships with those before you, there has to be a point where you realize they want you to be better than they were. They want you to learn from their mistakes. They want you to grow into the person they see you as. See, we're going to come back to that thought later, but in order to develop healthy relationships with those before you, you need to see growth in who you are first. You see, Reuel wasn't just a person that gave Moses a home and a family. No, he was a person that challenged Moses to become a better leader and a better man. See, there's this time where Moses put the responsibilities of Israel solely on his back. He carried everything. And Reuel saw this, and he knew it was only going to lead one way, to disaster. So Reuel said to Moses, Moses, you got to stop. Find people around you that can lead Israel with you, that you can lead together, people that love God and can be counted on. So we read in chapter 18, verse 24. So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all he said. Moses became a better leader for Israel because of the time he spent listening to Reuel. The investment that Reuel made into him paid off. See, we need to understand that these relationships require growth. So listen to those before you and grow with them. Now, there may be young men and women in the room here that are sitting here thinking, well, how do I find these kinds of people in my life? How do I connect with them? It's a great question, but the first practical step I have for you guys is to pray. Pray and ask God, who is somebody in my life? I need you to make it clear who the people are that should be pouring into me. Identify the people you deeply respect, the men and women that have gone before you, that you deeply, deeply respect. Then once you find someone, it's as easy as asking them to get lunch or dinner or just talking to them. See, think of all the people you've already naturally connected with in this stage of life before. Teachers, coaches, family members, so many more, naturally taking an interest in what they have in store while also letting them into your life is the best way to connect with those before you. Finding your Reuel is easier than you may think. You just have to be willing to ask. Look for those in front of you. Second, friendships with those beside you first requires accountability. Now, accountability is one of those weird words that no one really knows exactly what it means, right? Like honestly, no one here really knows all it has in store, right? And honestly, the only person that can keep yourself accountable truly for everything you do is yourself. But that doesn't mean that we are to give up on this completely. No. It's actually the opposite. You see, we are called. We should understand that we need to bring people into the hard places in our lives so that we may have their support and love in the middle of them. Proverbs 27:17, it's a verse that a lot of you have heard, I'm sure, but it reads, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. That doesn't mean always agreeing with or supporting everything that someone does, right? But no, it means having the accountability, the ability to step into someone's life and call them out and challenge them to be better when they do something wrong, right? Later on in the story of Moses, we read that God delivers the Ten Commandments to the nation of Israel through Moses. Moses is on top of a mountain, and he comes back down, and he sees the Israelites worshiping a golden calf, a false god, as he's literally talking with the real God on the top of a mountain. And the worst part of all of this is that Aaron was the one that created it. Aaron, the future high priest of Israel. Aaron, the brother of Moses. Aaron, the guy that's been there since the beginning. Moses doesn't let this slide. He doesn't say, oh, that's all right. He doesn't passive-aggressively, like, you're good, it's okay, we'll get better. No, he calls him out on his mistakes. He challenges him to be a better person. And later we see Aaron take on that ownership of the high priest of Israel. And he learns from his mistakes. And he becomes a better man and a better leader because Moses held him responsible and held him accountable. Make sure to be accountable with those beside you. The second thing it requires is joy. Now, I'm not saying this like momentary feeling of joy. No, I'm thinking a general, just overwhelming sense of joy when something goes right in their life, right? If you look back at Exodus chapter 7, verse 1, it reads, "And the Lord said to Moses, See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother shall be your prophet," or your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. At this moment, some of us may understand how hard it may have been if we were in Aaron's shoes to hear our role. Moses is God, and I'm under him. I can't be in this with him the same. We're not the same. And some of us would be a little upset, but not Aaron. No, Aaron takes joy in his ability to compliment his brother Moses and go out and do all that God has in store for him. When I was in school, we learned about this person. They're called balcony people. Now, it comes from back in the olden days. Way old. Sorry, that sounds like I'm talking about like the 50s. Sorry, no, like around Jesus' time. There we go. Around Jesus' time, when they would do these athletic events, whether it was running, whatever, the fans would sit in a balcony around, the real fans, not the rich people, but the real fans. And they would cheer on, they would support, they would love. And when their athlete won, they would go crazy. They would have this genuine joy. They were balcony people. Can you say that you are a balcony person for someone else, for one of your friends? Do you cheer them on or have joy when they succeed? Do you love it when they get a new job or a new car or a new house? When life is just going great for them, do you love it? Do you have joy? Are you feeling, or do you feel, man, I deserve that. I wanted that. That's what I need. See, we read later in the New Testament of another guy. This guy's kind of like my hero in the Bible, besides Jesus, of course. It's a guy named Barnabas. Barnabas became good friends with this guy named Paul, who went on to do some awesome stuff and become like the greatest missionary the world's ever seen. But the entire time, Paul it kind of reminds us that Barnabas is right there. Barnabas supports Paul. Barnabas loves Paul. Barnabas builds up Paul. And that without someone like Barnabas, Paul's life would have been made so much harder. Barnabas was a balcony person for Paul. So I ask you right now, are you someone who has joy when your friends beside you are doing well? You must have genuine joy for the friends beside you. I would say out of all the different types of friendships, this was the one that feels the most natural, right? Like we all have lists of people in our head, but they still can be hard. We could try so hard to connect with people and be left feeling like we have nothing in common. But the most important way to build these friendships is to just be yourself. Be normal. Don't be looking to get anything out of the friendship. Just be looking for a friend. Connect with people. If you're looking for friends, place yourself where people are. Go to like-minded, join a club, connect over shared interests, knock on your neighbor's door. You are not alone. I want to encourage everyone, because if you think you are, you're far from it. Everybody at some point or another feels this type of way. See, finding your Aaron, finding the person that will be beside you is easier than you think. You just have to be willing to put yourself out there. Look for those beside you. Finally, friendship with those behind you first requires authenticity. The only way you can truly invest in someone behind you is to make sure it is coming from a genuine place in your heart, a genuine love. Don't be doing it so that your friends will see that you're volunteering. Don't be doing it so that you may get a like on Instagram for helping out on a Sunday morning. Don't be doing it so that they owe you something later. No, do it because it's what our heart's desire is. See, God doesn't call you to invest in the next generation for your sake. He calls you to invest in them for His sake, for what He has in store. To raise up the qualities in someone that they can be used to further the kingdom, that can further what God has in store for everyone. Proverbs 27:9 reads, "Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel." Earnest counsel. The glitz and the glam isn't what makes a friendship valuable, especially one with those behind you. No, it's the thoughtfulness and genuine authenticity with one another that creates the catalyst for a deep connection that you may not even recognize is happening. Don't try to be anyone other than yourself, because they can tell. And then you quickly become just another person to them, another person that wants something of them. Don't try to be anyone other than yourself. And the authenticity will connect with them on a deeper level than you can ever dream of. Be authentic with those behind you. The second thing it requires is commitment. Now, a relationship, a friendship with those behind you, investing in that next generation, it's not like this one-time deal. It's not like rounding up your grocery bill to the nearest dollar and saying, oh, I did my good today. No, it's this sort of all-in assignment. It requires a lot. It requires a lot of you. If you look at Exodus 33:11, God kind of explains to Moses what this kind of investment looks like. It reads, "Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, just as a man speaks to his friend. When Moses returned to the camp, his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent." How much time do you think was spent in that tent where Moses was just pouring into, teaching, leading, building Joshua up so that he could one day lead the kingdom of Israel? You see, when you pour yourself into someone, you have to give up a bit of yourself. You maybe have to give up something you really want, but it's worth it. So you can't go halfway. You can't give a little bit. And the only way you will fully invest in someone behind you is if they understand that you are all in, that you are making that commitment, that you aren't holding anything back from them, that you're in, and that you are committed to the relationship you have with them. Make a commitment to someone behind you. Now, this may feel like the most unnatural friendship one may have, but they don't have to be this way. They don't. It can be really, really easy. In fact, this is the one that God calls for us to invest in, that next generation. To invest what we have, what we know, and who we are fully into them. Just like he called Moses back then, he calls us today, make the investment. See, this can be as simple as volunteering at a school, or investing time in your local Boys and Girls Club, or volunteering on a Sunday morning downstairs with me. It's fun. We have a ton of fun. In fact, our volunteer team right now is connecting with that next generation and loving them and teaching them just how much Jesus loves them each and every Sunday. It's that easy. Find somewhere to get plugged in. Maybe you need to connect with your friends' kid or your kids' friends or their families, or maybe coach a soccer team. That's always fun. Anything that allows you to be your authentic self and make the commitment to the next generation. Finding your Joshua is easier than you may think. You just have to be willing to invest in them. You do. Invest, make the commitment, and be authentic. Look for those behind you. As we wrap up today, I want to ask you one more time. Do you need a friend? See, there are countless people in this room. Look, if you said yes to this, look around. There's a ton of people here. There's people that want to connect with you. People that have gone before you. There's people that are beside you. Downstairs, there's a ton of little kids that are behind you that are looking for someone to pour into them, the next generation. You just have to be willing to go up and talk to them, to connect with them, to say hi. Put yourself out there. Because God gives friendship so that we may walk through life together. And nobody wants to be doing life alone. Yet that's not the only thing that God gives us. No, God gave us something else. He gave us a Savior. He gave us a Savior that walked this earth, made friends, changed lives, invested in people, loved others, healed them, led a perfect life. And then he died. And he took the death that we all deserve upon himself. See, in that moment, when he took his last breath, his friends had left him. The earth was quiet and dark. And death thought it had won. But heaven just waited. They just waited. Because 3 days later, Jesus came back to life. And he made it to where I no longer, and we all no longer have to experience the fear of death. We don't have to be afraid of the dark because we will only know life. Life with him forever. You will always have a friend in Jesus. Don't forget that. We're about to head into our time of prayer. And what that looks like today, it's just a moment where we get to be by ourselves and just listen to what God has in store for us. Listen to what God is saying to us. Because he's saying something. See, we're going to sing the song in a little bit, and it talks about how we are no longer slaves, but we are a child of God. And we've been talking this last 3 weeks about relationships, and ultimately the best example of the one that leads these relationships is God himself. Because he loves us enough that he created this whole world. And when we messed it up, he sent someone in to fix it. His own son. And that's how much he loves us. So when you're sitting there today, God does give us friendships so that we may walk through life together. But ultimately, we're all walking towards somewhere. And that place we're walking to is Jesus. Don't let this pass. Don't forget what he's done for us. And ultimately, don't forget the people around you that care enough, that want to be invested in you. Those that have gone before you, beside you, and behind you.